as a first-generation American. My family is from the Dominican Republic. Yeah, I think that's how sums up immediately what comes to my mind.
To introduce myself, I identify as Latin American. I'm Dominican. My parents are Dominican. Um, I am also a first generation college student, and I am 19 years old. And that kind of sums up it all too for me. Did I miss anything? Kind of.
However you identify. So if you don't want to.
He and his. I forgot.
Awesome.
I knew I was missing something.
I identify as a male, as American Aborigine, also called Black or African American. And I'm an entrepreneur.
That's curious because everybody who was asked the question identified as a person of color, and as a person of color, we all face what's called microaggressions, everyday racism. Like, we may not really realize it until, like, hold up, this person just said something to me that's being inappropriate or culturally insensitive. So, or it just might be blatant racism. So I'm curious to pose as a question to pose to the panelists, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with racism in your everyday life?
I'll go first on that one. I guess my way of dealing with racism every day is just making sure that I'm not what they entail us to be or what they want us to be. Like, I always make sure I make everyone around me feel comfortable, and not that I stay away from stereotypes, but I don't want people to walk in and think that just because I'm a person who is of color that I'm coming with wrongdoing or with malice or with bad meaning. So I always try to make sure to make sure that everyone around me knows that I'm a good person. And I feel like that goes with what you're asking, because when people walk in somewhere, they automatically read off their common stereotypes. So as the best way that I like to deal with common racism and the dirty looks and stuff is just I talk to people. I like to conversate. I get to know people. I let people get to know me before they can just read a book by its cover.
And the way I deal with racism, like, I just live my regular life. I'm 30 years old. For the past 30 years old, I would have to, like, tiptoe on eggshells, making sure I don't raise my voice too loud so I don't scare people. Making sure I don't stand too close to people so I don't scare people. But I really don't even care no more. I'm tired of living life on other people's terms. So I just do me. I'm kind. I'm humble. I like to help people. And people can see that. They can't see that. They don't want to see that. I really don't care. I try to stay away from the police as much as possible. Other than that, I just do me.
So just to introduce myself again, my name is Charlene Kotai. I'm a Spring 19 initiate from the Upsilon chapter of Justice Sorority Incorporated. I'm currently a second-year medical student at the CUNY School of Medicine, and my pronouns are he, she. So to answer this question, I think that for me, it's a little different. I do agree with what Quentin and Maximo said about, navigating racism, and to an extent, like, just stop tiptoeing around it and, like, stop walking on eggshells and just, like, live your life. But at the same time, for me, I feel like I'm in a unique position as a Black African-American woman of African descent, in the sense that when people see me, it's not just my color, like, my gender also is something that will be used against me. And to navigate that, I think that I try my best to educate people, honestly, is because for some people, when they have these racist, sexist, misogynistic views, they don't know any better. Perhaps that's how they were raised, and that's what they were taught, But if I can spare 2 or 3 minutes of my time to let them know that, listen, in a very polite way, to listen, like, these views are not okay for these reasons, and this is why, you should step away from them, and this is the truth. it might work and it might not work, but I think that for me, I've done my part in being able to educate people. I'm also someone who grew up in a different country and I moved out here. So that's something that I also have to, like incorporate in my life in terms of like, it's my duty to educate people about what the truth is. It's hard, it's tough. And if they listen, they do. If they don't listen, then I care about my life. So at the end of the day, like your views on who I am or what you think I am is not going to stop me from achieving success. I'm still going to do me so long as what I'm doing is not a negative contribution to my society.
For my answer, it's a little bit of both. Or actually, it's the opposite of what QP and Maximo said, and added on to what Charlene has said. So to explain that, I know the guys, they said that they try to just live their life, or like they try to live in a way that makes sure that they're not fulfilling this stereotype. But I guess I do things like, you know what, sometimes I'm going to be obnoxious and proud of where I come from. So in certain spaces, it might not be the best thing sometimes, don't get me wrong, and it's not like I do it all the time, but sometimes, you're in a space, instead of making them let me feel uncomfortable, I will, have my headsets on and blast my rap music or my dembow or, whatever I'm in the mood for that day. I will, make sure that I'm there and I'm taking up space. And just like you're uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm here. So what are we going to do about it? Again, not to say that, it's the best. I don't think there's a right answer to this either, but not to say it's like the best thing to do. Sometimes, you get yourself into some trouble, but that has kind of been one of my like go-tos, and as well as what Charlene said, like at the same time, I feel like it's as a Black woman, as a Latina woman, being both, and people not understanding that you're both, right? And then also being a woman, and then being educated, I feel the need to pass on that knowledge to other people, and to just sprinkle a little bit, like if I can get someone to think out the box, and to realize you can't identify others, or you can't use, Western ideals on someone, when the Western world isn't end all be all, right? So I feel like it's, especially within my own community, it's my responsibility to be a voice of education.
Lenny, you spoke on something a bit interesting, sort of speaking about, being that voice for people, and, Maximo and Quentin sort of touched on it in the sense of like living their lives, not living up to the stereotypes. But I'm curious, like, how do you raise those conversations? If you see someone uncomfortable, whether it's because of a conversation or the mere fact you walked into the room, how / do you talk to that person, or how do you raise the issue of race and ethnicity with that individual? / like, how do you educate them?
Yeah, first they have to be open to education, right? They have to be open to communication. If they're not open to any type of communication, then it's not going to work. But as us, like if we want to initiate it, we just say hi first, ask them how they doing. And we could go from there. And I saw that you had got a little intimidated when I walked into the room. We just start from there. Just be casual, just be cordial.
I could
Be educated though.
I could agree with Quentin. Like off the strength, they have to be willing to be educated and ready to have that conversation. But sometimes I feel like you might not even have to have that conversation. Like I'm the type of person that I feel like my vibe, the way that I am, it speaks louder. So if I walk in the room and you automatically feel intimidated, But as soon as the ball gets rolling, all I'm doing is talking to people and making sure everyone is having a good time. And I even come and say hi to you. And I'm just rolling around and trying to get around to everybody and be a good person. And that should be enough to show you that I'm not the person that you read me to be when I walked in this room. And that's enough to shut them up right there. So I feel like sometimes you don't even have to have a conversation. It's just a matter of stepping through the room and just being yourself, because that reads more than anything, just like your actions.
And to add into that as well, that's very well said, Maximo. But to add into that as well, it's like you also kind of have to get to know somebody a little bit more to see exactly what they need to be educated about. And this isn't just like, a one-time encounter. Like, so for example, I have friends who I've had to educate myself, because even though they grew up in New York, they might have grown up in a location and went to schools where they were associated with certain caliber of people. So now coming to, let's say, CCNY, where it's so diverse, it's like, you begin to notice how they navigate through the campus differently, or how they interact with people differently. And I've taken the time after months of knowing them to say, well, why does this make you uncomfortable? Like, why does being around a group of Black people make you uncomfortable? Why do you not want to go to this event? Because you think that, something bad will happen because of the kind of people who are there. And then that's when you begin to, get the person. And if they're open, like Quentin said, you can begin to, break down these stereotypes. But I like what Maximo said about you have to do your thing as well. So as a person who is close to this person, it's my duty to have the utmost representation of my race, of my gender, of my ethnicity, because I am their first sort of contact. And, first impressions are very important.
I feel like I'm kind of like the devil's advocate. I don't know. I definitely see all points, and I definitely have done all of the things that have been mentioned, but maybe it's just me lately, but I've also have been vocal about how, maybe not in the nicest way, not gonna lie, but I've been vocal about how, you flinched when I came into the room, or you automatically, went to the people that you were with, right? Let's say something like that. And I'll be vocal in the sense that I will maybe not directly, unless asked, or like it's a friend or someone that I know, but I will be vocal in the sense that I'll be like, yeah, I'm here. Hi, nice to meet you. I'll present myself to them, and hi, nice to meet you. And it'll kind of register through body language that I caught the cues. I caught the social cues, and I'm letting you know that's not okay without having to verbally say it, like Maximo said. But again, if it's someone that is your friend, because I've had to educate a lot of my friends about little things which are anti-Black that they've said themselves, or anti-Latino, and it's like, you need to watch what you say. This is where that comes from. This is from the foundation of you, unfortunately, having all of these anti-Black remarks brought up to you through childhood and through culture, so you definitely have to take the time to educate the people around you as well.
I think those are all super valid reactions. And I'm curious, just because Charlene and Lenny raised it just a bit, about, people not being used to being around a certain type of person. But even you yourself may not realize, like, oh, there's a little bit of, not resentment, but, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I shouldn't have thought that. Like, how do you reflect upon that yourselves, and how much have you had to do that? And if so, how did you become conscious of it, and what have you done to sort of change it?
Can you rephrase that? Like, I'm trying to answer it, but I'm not sure what you're trying to get at exactly.
Yeah, so my question is ultimately, like, we all not we all, but like there's been moments in time where we each have thoughts, or we've said something that we realized like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have said that, or well, like Lenny's friend, for example, who said like an anti.
Yeah, I get it now.
So like, what have you done to change? Like, what have you done to change that? How did you become cognizant of it, and sort of how would you help others become cognizant?
Oh, definitely. Like I feel like that's something that everybody on this panel has probably gone through in their life, being that like we live in this time where everything is changing, and every 4 years is a new different aspect in the whole America in a sense. So it's like growing up like that, I feel like the best way to deal with it is like being ready to learn and like understanding when people are teaching you things. Like, just because you have an opinion, and it's always good to stand on your opinion, but you have to admit when you're wrong, and you have to be willing to learn and grow about the topic, because things change, people change. So it's like you can't stay on one thing forever. So I guess the big step one is being liable to change and liable to understand and understanding of things that are going on. Step two will be, once you're educated on the topic, educate the next person, whether it be your grandma, your aunt, your cousin, your mom, but making sure you're educating them in a way that you're not belittling them, because then you come off a little ignorant in a way. Even if what you're trying to say is right, how you're saying it is wrong, so it cancels out. So I feel like that's a really like a quick 1-2 punch to fixing the problem and getting to the bottom of it as well.
I guess I'll go. For me, definitely it's always, being ready to learn, and also having an open mind, and at the same time, I guess also being kind to yourself and realizing, hey, you have these things that you have kind of just grown up to be true, like these things that aren't true, that they're actually very, very wrong, and they're not necessarily your thoughts. And so you have to also give yourself time to say, hey, I realize this is my fault. I've grown from it though. And I'm.
You're muted, Lenny.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that was my bad. Sorry, I was letting somebody in and accidentally muted you.
Nah, you're good. I don't know where I left off, but pretty much, yeah, you have to be kind to yourself, and just realize that you're willing to learn too. And sometimes you have these thoughts, but as long as you catch it and you're like, why? And you're willing to put it into a perspective like, no, I don't think this. I just so happen to have heard this so often that I thought it was true. And now I'm seeing the light, and I'm like, no, that's not okay, and willing to apologize, especially. I think that's the final thing, willing to apologize for it, not just being like, oh, well, now I know. It's okay, let's reflect, let's acknowledge, and move forward.
And lastly, I think that like something that I came across, especially like this last couple of months when tensions have been heightened with race relations, is that you don't have to love me, you don't have to like try to like be my friend or whatever it is, but you will respect me. And so that goes both ways, is that like to an extent, even if I have certain like ideas about a particular group of people, right, I don't have to love them, I don't have to want to be close to them, but I have to be able to understand where they come from and who they are enough to respect them, such that when I'm in the same room with them, we can coexist for the betterment of our society. And so what I'm saying, so yes, I can try to understand certain things, even from my end, I can try to see things from a different perspective. But until I reach that level of being able to respect somebody, then I'm not making progress. And I think that's the key. It's being able to see that, okay, I'm in the wrong for thinking this way, for saying that. I'm sorry about it. I may not understand your plight, I may not understand where you're coming from, but I will respect your wishes and your opinions, and I will coexist with you.
Yeah, I agree with all of them. Like Maximo said, you got to be willing to learn new things. I've been taught things as a young kid about different types of people, and then I grow up, I'm going to school with these people, You know, we start fighting over petty things that we don't even realize what we're fighting for. And we start to learn each other's culture, and we realize that we're both cool. We both have different things that we want to teach each other. Somebody may speak a different language. Somebody might have a different type of dance. We have different type of foods. And we got to be open to learn. And even if we don't end up liking each other for whatever reason, we still have to respect each other, respect each other's culture. And it's not just, right now, it's not even just about, like, the topic, like this question that you asked is not just about race relations. It's basically about the future society. Because now we're in the globalization, and you have to learn these new things to survive. Un momento. You have to learn these new things to survive. You have to be willing to learn different languages and go to different places, because it's no longer that you just get a job and you stay there for 20 to 30 years. Everybody's moving around. You're competing with a whole world. So people in America is competing with people from Asia now. And people from Asia is competing with people in Latin America. And people in Latin America competing with people from Europe. So everybody's together, and we have to learn these things. The world is a melting pot.
100% agree. And thank you to all the panelists for answering my question. It wasn't on the prepared questions, but I thought it was important to ask in light of several of the answers that we received. So thank you. But just to continue on the topic of respect and sort of everything that's been going on as of recently, I'm curious to know how you personally, not your organization or your position, whatever, how you personally feel about the Black Lives Matter movement. Have you participated in any protests? Have you been involved in any sort of way, whether it's going out to the streets or posting about on social media about it? I'm curious to know what if any activism have you taken in the past 6 months?
Black Lives Matter, like, I feel like it comes around and it goes and it comes around, and like this time it came around in a way that we weren't even expecting, you know, and then it slapped us alongside COVID, and it was like the momentum that it picked up was like unforeseen. But I feel like the momentum that it grabbed was good for the movement, but the fact that the momentum died, it like the movement was going well, and then they didn't keep fighting, and like, you know, we're kind of back to square one. So like, I love the momentum that everybody had and the way it was going, and I wish that, you know, we could have kept going harder just so the change could come as we wanted to come. Because like, I feel like, yeah, when stuff like this happens, we take 10 steps forward, but at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, we take 5 steps back. So I feel like everybody's little bit of activism went a long way. However, though, because a lot of money was raised and a lot of things did change, not as much as we wanted and not as quick as we wanted, but things did change. And I feel like what I did to bring awareness and to my form of activism would be like just promoting the right thing and sharing the right news, because throughout all this time, all we were seeing were literally fake news and real news. And it's so hard to decipher in today's day and age because it costs little to nothing to put something on social media. So it's like you have to help other people around you, because it's true what they say. Like, when people say one person's voice is not the loudest, or it might not matter, but your voice and who you're telling and who you're sharing the right news with, or the right ways to be aware with, that matters. So if I tell 10 people, that's 10 people that are also aware, that are also supporting BLM. So I feel like, although I wasn't at every protest, although I wasn't, you know, also on national TV protesting, my way of sharing and using my platform and using my organization's platform and my friends and telling my friends and just sharing the right news with my family and my mom and my grandma, who might not be watching all the right news and might not be having all the right sources, just enlightening them was enough activism to, you know, help BLM move as a whole.
To add on to what Maximo said, I don't fully, you know, agree with the idea of, you know, the movement dying down. Why? Because I'm someone who's actually very much involved with the movement, with different organizations, you know. And yes, like, maybe people aren't talking about it as much as they were before, but we have to consider why, you know. And one main factor is because outside is open up again. When everything happened, you know, in the heat of quarantine, the heat of COVID, everyone was home. So everyone was going outside. Everyone was on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, right? But now when things are back open and people are back to school, people are back to their jobs, you now have less manpower to go outside. So that could be a reason why we see that it's died down. But I best believe that every day a protest happens in either Brooklyn, Queens, or the city. There's one happening right now tonight, which was called urgently for Breonna Taylor after the verdict came and only one cop got indicted. So the movement is still going on. And when we talk about the movement, it's much bigger than just a protest. You know, the movement for racial equality or to end racial injustice has different levels and different flavors. There are some people who have to go out to the streets to protest, and I respect them for that. You know, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to do that. There are people who have to run social media and post the flyers and make the flyers. You know, there are people who have to go on TV. And and I don't want this last point to come off the wrong way, but even when the riot started, right, and we had people who were going to loot stores, believe it or not, like that is a process of a revolution, or people, you know, showing their anger, their frustration. It's all part of it. So from the looting all the way down to marches and protests, that is the movement. Movement is still alive. How do I participate? I go out when I can. I make sure to, you know, research policies. So I'm very much into like policy and advocacy. And I want to know what policies are out there. Who are my elected officials? Who is in my local government that I can talk to make a change? When it comes like the census, voter registration, how can I help people in my community to fill the census? Because this is something that happens every 10 years and determines how much funding we get. Let's educate people about things like participatory budgeting, right? So the money that comes into your community, how is it allocated? What buildings are determined to become historical buildings that will bring money to your community? All of this is the Black Lives Matter movement, the different levels of it. And I think everyone has a different role to play in it. And there's some people, you know, who will document the movement, photographers, you know, which I do as and when I can, when I go out to the streets. But the movement is very much still alive. As someone who is very much active in it in terms of policy-wise and doing action as well, it may not be as spoken about because of the fact that, you know, like people are going back to their lives. But the folks who are committed to this movement, and it's another thing, like there are certain people who come into the movement for clout. You know, they come to show face and just get recognition, be on TV, and that's it. They just want to be groupies, you know. And there are folks who are dedicated to this work. We currently have like I think a 20-year-old who is running for the mayor's office, the youngest person to ever do it. Like this is an infectious movement, and it's infecting the youth all the way from high school to college. And the more we can spread, you know, different ways of helping the movement, the better that the momentum will carry. And lastly, it's like people who are in the movement, it's really, really important to check in on your mental health. There's a lot to take in, you know, seeing someone get shot or tased or stabbed on TV every single day on Twitter trending, it does something to your mental health, you know. So it's important to take a step back and just say, okay, hold on now. Like I've been to 3 protests this week. Maybe on day 4, I need to clock out. I need to turn my social media off, and I'm not talking about race relations anymore. I had to do that because it got to a point where between school and between what was on social media, it was just too much. So that's just like, you know, my 2 cents on that.
Thank you for piggybacking off what I said and, you know, kind of enlightening me on some of the things that I didn't even know were going on.
Absolutely.
Thank you, man.
Okay, the reason why we're having these discussions.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, if we didn't have this event right now, I would probably be out in Soho. But again, disclaimer, Maximo, I know you're up in New Paltz right now, so that's a little different. But yeah, like definitely everything that Charlene said is valid. And as someone who has, you know, been in the streets as well, it's definitely something that's scary. And, you know, oftentimes even being in the street, it's like, I try to make sure to go to protests that are when it's daylight still, right? Because that's when stuff hits the fan. And unfortunately, Again, emphasis on unfortunately, you know, when you are trying to be in higher education, getting arrested, even for something that you believe in, is something that we think about, right? And I'm saying this to obviously a college educated crowd. So I definitely know that you guys understand what I'm talking about. And it's not that I don't care any less, that I care any less. It's just little things like that. Or again, having to take a break. I literally just deleted all my social media accounts because I cannot anymore. It's so concentrated. It's overstimulation of so many awful things. I personally don't ever watch the videos, but even then, just hearing about it, you know, just hearing about Breonna Taylor, like they're not, like what? Like, you know, just hearing about the decision itself, or just something on the news, unavoidable. It's something that I think definitely as a community, we're grieving. And, you know, everyone grieves in a different way. And again, there's so many aspects to a revolution, and revolutions aren't pretty. And revolutions aren't just you walking around with cardboard and screaming, you know, for justice. It's also you're tired of screaming for justice, that you have to put these things into action. So definitely, I agree with everything. And even then, I was looking at something earlier, and I just like found randomly some article about Black Lives Matter movement that I made way back in high school, you know, as a senior or whatever, because I've always been very vocal, and I put it on our newspaper in a Catholic high school, which is kind of conservative, and I remember I got flack for it, but I posted it anyway, and so it's actually ironic, like these things aren't just now, it hasn't just been this year, it's been all the way even before, you know, Trayvon Martin. You know, these things have been going on. I do think though that with everyone being in their house recently and having to stick to being indoors and constantly getting this overstimulation, we have attracted way more people to the movement, but I don't think it's dying down anytime soon. And if it does die down, quote unquote, I think that's a shame. I think that's kind of embarrassing that people know it's happening, overly know it's happening, considering all the posts that everyone's done, all the media that's been around it, all the actual actions of the looting, to the peaceful protests, to people getting stuck on the bridge. You know, I think I definitely would be more than disappointed, and just at that point, you know, I think we should do some other stuff, but that's for another time.
Yeah, the movement isn't dead. It's just not being publicized that much anymore. It's not out in the media, but it's protests every single day.
It's not mainstream. It's not mainstream.
Yeah, and not even just in this country, in other countries too, they still having protests.
For the same thing.
Yeah, I respect the Black Lives Matter movement. I respect the individuals that's part of it. I respect the groups that's part of it. I post on social media for support. I've gone to a couple of protests. Like Charlene said, that's needed. Everybody have their own fight in the movement. Everybody have their own lane. We all have our different gifts that we have to bring to the table. So like for me, I actually like I believe in a different approach. Like I believe that we should be building our own, like a Black Wall Street, like Chinatown, Little Italy, or even like Indian reservations. I believe that we should control our elected officials, like our city councilmen and our congressmen. And I believe that we should control the money that comes into our community. And with that, I would think we have a lot more power over what we do. So when we protest, it's just not like, oh, they go to them protesting again. Because if you see how much money we spend a year, we don't really spend it on like taking care of our community, you know, or building our community. Yeah, materialistic things. So that's why in my lane, I'm an entrepreneur, because I want to I promote Black people being more self-sustainable, and that goes into the environment as well, but self-sustainable economically, politically, and just everything. And just like when Lenny was saying, like she wants to help, and she goes out to the protest, but she still has to be careful for being arrested, because it can mess up her career, it can mess up her whole life. But if we have our own communities, strong, thriving communities, you know, things like that, when we go out to fight for things and we actually have to get arrested, we're gonna be okay. We're gonna be taken care of because we control our communities, we control our neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? So things like that. And I believe that our organizations actually have a lot of power to change that, you know. And the future is coming. I feel like it's right around the corner. A lot of people are starting to wake up.
I want to piggyback off of what he said, like really quickly, because I do agree that I feel like it's a time right now that's coming, and I feel like the change is brewing. And like, you know, when your mama's cooking and you smell it all the way in your room, like I feel like it's about to be ready, and I feel like change is gonna come faster than we expect, just because of like look how much happened in what we in 9 months of 2020. Look how much happened. So you don't think a change like that is liable to happen in the next year? That'll make a year and a half, 2 years of us fighting for change straight. Like I said, like there's still processes going on every single day. So it's like a year and a half, 2 years straight. We're not seeing it because it's going right before our eyes, but that's time going by, and that's change waiting to happen. Because it's like, we're not gonna fight. All this fight is not gonna be for nothing. I guarantee you that. Too many people fighting, you know. But they can't change it overnight, and I understand. But you know, all this time that we've created, all this momentum that we've created and gotten past, like I feel like that's gonna come. It's gonna come back to us like a boomerang, but in a good way.
So I'm curious sort of about this momentum and what Charlene referred to as the multiple levels of a revolution, because it isn't just protests or social media postings or whatever. It's way deeper than that. But and like what we consider momentum doesn't necessarily, I'm injecting my own personal opinion, doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to necessarily drive change. Like something beyond a momentum needs to happen for change to happen. So a lot of the momentum that we had been seeing was more symbolic, and you know, the social media posts and like cities painting Black Lives Matter on entire streets in front of Trump Tower, in front of the White House, etc. So I'm curious to know how you feel about sort of these symbolic measures / like, you know, people posting on their social media, and then that's it. That's the extent of protesting or social activism that they do. So I'm curious, do you think that it helps the movement? Do you think it hurts the movement?
I mean, I feel like, you know, art is self-expression, and people are, and like a big part of a revolution is art. And when I say art, I use art very vaguely to, you know, encompass, you know, like paintings, drawing, murals, music, poetry, articles, propaganda. That's all art, you know. But I'm not moved, like, even if the entire world was painted Black Lives Matter, right? That doesn't shake me, because until the laws are changed and until the systematic issues are addressed, you can paint my entire house from bottom to up in black, you know, for Black Lives Matter, and like that doesn't change anything. That's just how I feel about it. Yes, it's nice to have a road named Black Lives Matter. It's nice that, you know, in Brooklyn, the entire Fulton Street is covered in Black Lives Matter, but the fundamental problem here that we are fighting is still not fixed. And that's the problem. Like, we marched for over 150 days for Breonna Taylor, right? And look at the verdict that they got today. 1 cop indicted, 15,000 bond, and he wasn't even charged for manslaughter. And the other 2 cops, what happened to them? So I feel like the art that's being put out there by, you know, all these grand gestures are distractions to the goal, because it puts you in this space where it's like, okay, like, I guess they hear me, and because they hear me, you know, they're taking steps to making things better by giving us all these other things. You know, it's almost like a child, right? If a child says, mom, I want this candy, and and the boy or the little girl is like bothering you all day, but you don't want to give him the candy, so you give him maybe a carrot instead, and he eats the carrot and he shuts up, right? It's similar to that. But once the carrot is done, that's not what the child wanted. So the child is gonna come back and say, no, like that was not a candy. I want the candy now. It's exactly what we are going through now. People have to be able to just like say, listen, like we don't need you to paint down roads. We don't need you to make concepts free or give us all these other stuff. We just want change. Like defund the NYPD, put the money into our CUNY system, make CUNY free again, give SUNYs money, put money into our hospitals, into our communities, into where it matters. There's no reason why the NYPD has gear equivalent to the military, and the school in my neighborhood doesn't even have like enough scholarships and funds for kids to go there. There's no reason why the entire New York City, our public school system, is way worse than those on Long Island. You know, like people who are working hard for their families also deserve some type of, yeah, exactly. You know, be it healthcare, education, um, 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 financial assistance, government assistance, whatever it is. You know, so that's just my take on the grand gestures that are out there.
Yeah, I wanna piggyback on Charlene because I agree with a lot that she was saying, and like I feel like we should never show to them that we are content with their temporary band-aids, with their band-aids of art, like she was saying, like the streets painted, or changing a block to Black Lives Matter Wade. Like, yeah, they're gonna promote that. That's what they're gonna put on the front of the newspaper. That's what they're gonna have on the news. But in reality, nothing is really changing. No laws are being changed. There's no stop being put to systematic oppression. My sister's school still has less than 150,000 for over 200, 300 students, right? So it's like, what is actually being done besides things that people who care are doing? Because at the end of the day, it's the Black Lives Matter people that are doing all this art stuff, that are painting the streets, are making the murals, are doing all these beautiful things. So, okay, you're not sending us to jail for doing graffiti, but you're gonna send us to jail over, a bag of marijuana, let's say. Like, it's stuff like that. So it's like, is the change really happening, or are they displaying it on the TV for us so our families could think? Because, like, we're more educated, but our parents that work all day and just come home and watch a little bit of TV and see that, oh, they did this, oh my God, this happened, they let this go, but that's not really making change for us. I that's why I wanted to end my saying on that, but I definitely wanted to be with Charlene on a lot of stuff she was saying.
I think that it's performative, especially in the media. And I think that's why, like, if we want change, this election is like so important. That's why voter registration, people need to go out there, text banking, and that will be the thing that will lead us to justice. And so I think this election is important, and just keeping that momentum up throughout the election, always just advocating and just using our voice.
Yeah, art is important to the revolution, but it is not the only thing, man. People are out there being murdered, and people are out there still being enslaved. Like I said, we gotta control our communities, we gotta control our neighborhoods. So like the presidential election is important, but we gotta control city council as well. We gotta hold our congressmen and congresswomen accountable. Like they don't even have interns. They can keep running as much as they want to. And people are not even really paying attention to them because we keep paying attention to the president. Like even before the cops are controlled by the city. So if a cop kills a person, it's going to the city first. And the city messes up, then we could push it to the federal government. You know what I'm talking about? So that's just part of it. But we got to be in control all the way around. So we got to look at the legislation, right? We got to look at the prison industrial complex, because Black people are still being enslaved. Slavery never ended. It just became different terms. We have prisons, we have corporations, which are the new plantations. Slavery never ended. It's still like we living in the late 1600s, man. But it's different. Just because we could drink a cafe, you think that we free, but we not really free. So we gotta look at those things. Then our educational system, they're educating us to be slaves in their system. They don't want us to be free. They want to keep us embedded in their system. And they want to keep us embedded in their prison so we can keep making their products that we then go and buy. So, I mean, I know I got off topic a little bit, but I just got a little passionate, you know?
I do condemn entrepreneurs for that, though, because entrepreneurs are the ones that are stepping out the box and being the bosses. And you know, I know it's hard and it's a lot of bumps on the road, but y'all take that initiative and y'all try to make something out of nothing for make a difference where you from or for your family or in your community.
For a fact. And I get all points, and I definitely think that attributes to what Charlene originally said. You know, there's multiple layers to a revolution, and it does go with education. It does happen to go with voting. Shout out to my LS for putting that in there, because that's definitely one of our the Raíces Week programming is about, you know, making your voice heard, and that's one of the ways that we can do that. And it's also being on the ground. It's also looting and hitting them where it hurts, you know, and hit them where it hurts. Like, that's money, right? And even then, making sure that we're not focusing just on property, that we're talking about real lives. You know, this is life or death, and people have the audacity to focus more on the fact that a Nike store, which is a huge corporation, was robbed of a couple $100,000 of merchandise or something like that. You know, it's all kind of performative. It's all a way to distract us from the real thing, which is nothing really is getting done other than getting Black Lives Matters away, you know, or putting different signs up in different places. And I definitely think it depends on everyone's role, and everyone has a role. And, you know, sometimes when I don't protest, right, I would do jail help, which is the morning after for the people that were in the protest late night, you know, having them come out and giving them food, water, giving them a Metro card, you know, and being outside the jailhouse and just waiting for them to come out and helping them in any way, shape, or form. Because I hope no one's getting booked, but, like, you know, just when you are, though, and you're processed, they strip you of everything. And so even then, like, making sure that whatever it is that you choose to do, if it's a social media post or not, getting back to just the original question, it doesn't just stop there, because yes, COVID's real, right? And you know, you never know anyone's at-home situation, and not everyone can go out and actively do something about it and engage with other people, especially strangers. That's great. That's fine. That's valid. So, okay, you're going to post it on all social media platforms. You're going to make sure that you're constantly talking about it amongst your friends, amongst your family members, especially like Latinx community, teaching them, hey, yeah, back in the island, it was this way, but that's not how it is here. Back in the island, you thought like that because Trujillo loved white people and he wanted to make it, I'm talking obviously specific to DR, he wanted to make the island more white, and he was negating all the black, and then he wanted to kill off all the shit.
He was a brainwashed puppet.
Yeah, he was brainwashed, you know, and so just like adding this, because what you're doing through social media is passing on knowledge, but making sure that passing on knowledge, it doesn't have to be, you know, person to person, like physical, but it can be virtual. And as long as you're making it a point to get to everyone that you can, I feel like that isn't performative. But stopping right there because it's cool, because you got enough likes, because now people think you're woke, that's the problem. And again, not to say that there aren't multiple dimensions to this. Again, a revolution is not, you know, pretty, and there needs to be people handing out the waters. There needs to be people in the offices. There needs to be people, you know, registering people to vote. There needs to be all of these moving parts to it. And I feel like anyone who wants to be part of it can be.
Those are all great answers. I appreciate it. But both Maximo and Lenny talked on a specific topic I want to delve into. It's a pretty meaty one, but it'll be the last question before we open it to a broader discussion / questions. So there, as a Latina, I can speak from firsthand knowledge that there is a deep racist sentiment in our community, especially with the older generation, with our parents, but even people recently arrived, or who came straight from, who are actually from Latin America, in that like their struggles, when I say they, are our Black brothers and sisters struggles are their struggles. No me importa, no me involucra. What happens to them doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect me. And similarly, there is I don't know if it's necessarily an anti-racist movement or sentiment, but I think there's a lack of recognizance of Latin issues that are typically thought of as Latino also affect Black people. I'm gonna speak of one that I know of directly. I'm an immigration attorney down in Miami, Florida. A good chunk of the people that I serve are people of Haitian descent. Obviously, Black brothers and sisters, but immigration is thought of as almost purely Latino issue. So, when Latinos are out on the streets saying abolish ICE, reunite the families, free people from detention, it's thought of as a Latino issue. And there's also this Black Lives Matter movement that's thought of as, a purely Black issue, maybe not necessarily amongst ourselves, but definitely amongst our older generation. So I was hoping that the panelists could talk sort of about the intersectionality of that, how you're dealing with that intersectionality at home within the Black Lives Matter movement, and within the broader. I'm using immigration just because that's what I know. But I know that there's a lot of other issues that that involve both races that aren't necessarily recognized.
So being that my mom is pretty young, I don't really have that problem with her as much. But like my aunts and grandmas, like they like to say like smart comments about people of color and not realize that we are people of color. So an example that I usually like to put to them is like my family. Not that they had a problem, but they used to make fun of me because whenever we had a family party and they're playing like all this bachata and merengue, I'm like, yo, can I take this off and put some hip hop on? Can I put some rap on? So they were telling me like, oh, like you think they'll say, "Tu crees que tú eres moreno? You don't like to go to your roots. You don't like your route, whatever." So I'm just like, yo, the same way y'all think that. Let's say a cop, and I told my, like, this might seem a little harsh going to a family member, but I'll tell my aunt like, yo, the same way y'all will tell me that I get pulled over upstate. I'm driving to school and the cop pulls me over and he hears my rap and he hears my music, and automatically I'm nothing but a person of color to him. He doesn't know if I'm Dominican. He doesn't know if I dance bachata. I am a person of color and he's pulling me over. The same way it happened to that man on Instagram or that man on YouTube or that man in Florida, wherever it happened, it can happen to me. And I'm not Black. I mean, I'm not like African American, but what you're trying to say is that it's an African American thing, but it's not. It can happen to any of us. It can happen to all of us. So the same way it could be me, you can't say, because people in the Latino household, the older people, they'll like to say something like "ellos son así," which is how they are, right? I'm sure we've all heard that before in our Latino household, but it's not like that, and you got to explain that to your family, because the same way you think they are like that, right? Someone could think that I'm like that, and I could be a victim. And just because I'm your family is different. No, it's not different. It can happen to me, and it can happen to the next man. So like I'm just saying this to say that I try to teach my family in a harsh way, just to show you, like, as harsh as I sound, your ignorance slapped me in the face just like that. Surprised me just how just how the way that I'm coming off to you, a family member, is coming off. Because that's like a conversation like that is the kind of conversation that if you have at a dinner table, things are going to get quiet after that. Like things are kind of going to get awkward. So it's like, yeah, like that's how you made me feel when my family member is saying something so ignorant like that, and something that's like, how can you say something like that? So that's my way of dealing with it. Like, even though I'm harsh, it's tough love, but at the end of the day, you're my family, and you're gonna represent me where you go. You go to a room and say that around the wrong people, like you're reflecting me and I'm reflecting you, and it's gonna be bad. So that's my way of dealing with it.
I think that definitely, checking people is a big part of it, because often at times, like everyone wants to separate themselves from what the issue is. Like, oh, like that's an African issue, that's a female issue, that's a male issue, that's a black man's problem. Like, at the end of the day, it's like, so long as you don't take Caucasian, that's what I say. If you don't take Caucasian in that box, you literally fall right back in the same category. And the sooner in which we can stop being divisive, the better we can combat this bigger problem. And this goes back to what Quentin was saying about education. The educational system is a big part of the reason why certain kinds of like ideologies are able to perpetrate, just based on the structure of it. Aside from whatever cultural views we may hold, And for me personally, like, I tend to remind people that a lot of the rights that you enjoy now in the 21st century, you enjoy it because queer black women and LGBTQ plus people were in the streets marching. The same people who you don't want to look at because you think that they are sinning or they are not clean because of who they choose to love are the exact same people who were getting beat, getting shot, getting tased for you to enjoy these rights. So just think about that for a second. So once again, it goes back to my point of, you don't have to love them. If you don't agree with let's say, and for me, in my culture, that's what I face. A lot of animosity, perhaps against people in the LGBT plus community. And for me, it's like, you don't have to respect. You don't have to love them or hate them because they choose to love the same gender or they're queer or whatever it is. Like, at the end of the day, gender is a spectrum, and everyone should be free to be who they are and be happy within themselves. Who they choose to love or who they choose to be with is none of your business. But you will respect their decision, because what they decide to do does not impact your life and it doesn't really hurt you. If anything, these are the people who are fighting for you to enjoy these rights now. And people don't know that. People forget that. So I'm very quick to bring up the facts of all these movements and all these successes that go on. Be it in a religious setting. And my favorite thing about that is, when people, and let's say the Catholic Church or Christianity, try to talk against certain things, I'm like, listen, man. Like, end of the day, the Bible said to love your neighbor, right? And so, who are you to judge your neighbor? Just love them, like the book that you believe in says, and leave the judgment up to your higher being. So, at a point in time, like, you also have to know what these people who have these ideas believe in, so you can begin to use that to educate them.
I mean, everything that has been said is definitely valid. And going with my own family, I am very proud to say that I've gotten, my family on board of who they are. I'm going to say in touch with their roots, because whether they wanted to admit it at the time or not, we're Black. I identify myself as a Black woman first, and then, Latinx is my ethnicity. So it's a subculture, and one I'm very proud of, don't get me wrong. And that oftentimes leads people to look at me sideways from both groups, like, what do you mean? And but I definitely feel like it's a conversation where Afro Latinx or Black Latinx, because there's a difference between white Latinx and Black Latinx, where they have been kind of erased, kind of within like the Latinos for BLM, I think that's a slap in the face to me. I don't agree with it at all. And I get the incentive. I get the sentiment. I get it. Like, yeah, we're supposed to be, you know, united or whatever, but that's not how it comes across. And if anything, it's like, where do I fit? You know? And so things like that, kind of rooted just, again, in the anti-Blackness or the very division of, oh, we're part of Spain. It's always European and Taino, and everyone kind of stays quiet about the Afro part or the African part of your descendencia, which is your descendants, you know? It's like, again, you're yellow, you're mellow, black, stay back. You know, there's the same thing of, that goes along the same lines with mejorando la raza, right? And these are unfortunate things that have been fed into our culture that need to be addressed. I think they need to be called out. I think people need to talk about it and be like, well, that's a problem. That's a problem for this reason, that reason, the third. And these unfortunate like concepts are why that there's a division of, oh, ICE, that's a Latino problem, especially like with Mexicans, when Mexicans aren't the largest group. It's, again, Haitians, right? So, oh, that's a Latino problem. Or being shot down by the police, oh, that's a Black problem. But again, most of us are both. And where does that leave us? Or even if you're not both, to the people who are in charge of this country, right, which is a white cisgender heterosexual male, it doesn't matter what you are, what you think you are. You don't check off that box of Caucasian. And so educating our communities, right, especially the Latinx community of, no, tú eres negro. And saying negro is okay. Negro shouldn't have a negative connotation to it. Negro is a color. And guess what? Being negro is beautiful. Like, yes, okay. Like, people call me, yo soy negra. Yes, I am negra. I get it all the time. And I'm okay with it. And I feel like, again, it has this historical background, but especially people like us, educated youth, we're here to destroy these stereotypes, destroy this animosity amongst each other, and this pointing at each other and calling each other different things, when at the end of the day, we're roots of the same tree, different roots of the same tree, right? And so, again, calling it out within our own communities, but also calling it out as a whole and joining the movement. Even if you are a white passing Latino, you making sure that you're part of the BLM community, or you're Black and actually you're African American, right? In the sense that your parents, your families, your lineage is down south, right? You're not from another country, but you participating in protesting against ICE and other injustices around the world, female mutilation, a bunch of other things. It's always, well, that's not affecting me, but it starts with us. And likewise, how it's affecting them, I feel like just self-reflection, realizing you're not what they want you to be either. You're not a Caucasian, cisgender, heterosexual, then it doesn't matter to them either. And likewise, you're gonna get stopped. And a big part of that comes from, New York City, like, or where you're at in Miami, down in Miami, or even in LA. We get this melting pot, and we kind of forget that anywhere else, like Maximum right now, where you're at, you're just a Puerto Rican. Either you're Puerto Rican or a Black Mexican. I can't tell. Either way, you're not one of us, right? And I've gotten that, and that's why I'm saying it. Either way, you're a spick or you're an N-word, right? And this is a harsh reality, but once we accept it and we're proud of our roots and proud of every single aspect that makes us who we are, I think that's when the conversation can really start to grow. And that's actually when we can join together in a revolution and actually make it happen. Sorry, that was a little long. My bad.
All good points. All good
That
points.
was good. I think this was a loaded statement. Yeah, it's true. I think there's a lot of Black people that don't agree that the Latino problems is our problems, and there's a lot of Latino that don't agree that the Black people's problems is their problems. But at the end of the day, it goes back to being open to learning, being open to conversation, and actually learning. Because if you look back throughout history, we all kind of the same people. But hold on, even before I get there, like, you got to travel. I'll take you back to globalization. You got to travel because you have to get to learn different cultures. When you go to the Caribbean, you go see people that look just like people on your block. Like, if you black and your friends is dark skinned or light skinned, you go to DR or you go to Puerto Rico, you're gonna see somebody that looks just like your homie, and they're from there. They just speak Spanish. Y'all just have a different culture, a different language, but y'all the same people. It's a saying that we was all a boat stop away. When we talk about the African diaspora, they stopped on all of those islands and all of those countries in South America, in the Caribbean. They did not miss one. So we all part of the same people. We may be from Nigeria or Ghana or Ivory Coast. It don't matter. We all part of the same people. We all have similar cultures. And like Maximo was talking about the music, hip hop, merengue, that all goes back to African music. It all goes back to African drums. So again, we all part of the same people. So how can our problems not be each other's problems if you look at everything I just said, we all part of the same people. And even before the African diaspora, there were Africans traveling the world, even before Columbus even came over here, even before the Europeans started the African slave trade. Africans was coming back and forth. North America, Central America, and South America. They had their own empires over here, and the people that was over here had their own empires, and they mingled in with each other. So even before you get to the African diaspora, there was already black people over here. So how is their problems not our problems, and our problems not their problems? Furthermore, it was a system that was put into place, and the system wasn't just unique to our certain location. The system was actually a global system. It had to do with colorism for one and classism, but people think, well, we all educated in certain institutions and schools that was built by the same system. It may be different in North America than it is in South America, than it is in Africa, but this system was put on all of us in different ways. It's something called the Willie Lynch syndrome. Put the light skinned slave against the dark skinned slave. Put the house nigga against the field nigga. Put the fat one against the skinny one. And then we all come up with all these problems against each other, these distractions. So we're so busy fighting each other that we can't actually solve the real and true problem. So people like Trujillo, what Lenny was talking about, people like Trujillo that Lenny was talking about, and that was just an example that's in DR. But it was examples like that all over the world, where white supremacist establishment put people in power to further their agenda and keep us divided. And we end up solving a problem. We end up killing each other. So, yeah, man. So we all the same people. We may speak a different language. We may eat different food. We may listen to different people. But we was all a boat stop away. And in history, we clashed a lot against each other because of what they taught us, of what the system taught us. To be more specific, because I'm not against white people. I'm against the white supremacist system. We all clashed against each other because of what the system taught us, because of what the system embedded in us and our parents and our grandparents. But it's a new day. We all have phones. We all have laptops, and we have to communicate. We have to teach each other. I have a Caribbean friend. He's extremely revolutionary, extremely. But he didn't mess with Latino people. And it's because of what our history, what we went through, you know? He didn't mess with Latino people. So slowly over time, I had to keep breaking into this notion like, bro, they the same like us. And if we don't put them part of the revolution, none of us is going to win. Latino people not going to win by themselves. Black people not going to win by themselves. We have to realize that we the same. We have to destroy the system completely and create a new one. And a one that's more just, and one that's more fair, one that's more about peace, one that's more pro-life and more pro-human. Because even after we put the whole black and Latino thing aside, at the end of the day, we all human, bro. Like, there should be no reason why we don't want another human being to have an equal education or another human being to eat decent food and drink clean water. Like, to make sure another human being has a roof over their head. Like, I don't know what religion everybody is, but it doesn't matter about religion. It matters about what's inside. And deep inside, if you're a human, you can feel that other people should have the same thing. There's enough resources on this planet to feed everybody. And there's a system that put us in this hoarder mindset, and we want to go against each other instead of helping each other. And it's the same thing with Black people and Latino people. We need to work together. And if we work together, this system has no chance.
All great points, and I know that there's a discussion going on in the chat. So
you're going buck wild in the chat. I love it.
For real. So I would love to open the discussion up, but I just want to interject / start off the discussion with something that Lenny said, that she was like, "Tu es negra, girl. Look at me. Look at my skin color. I'm dark for a Costa Rican. I got called negra my entire life," and I was like,
"Como?"
What exactly? And two, I'm like, and what? Like, I grew up in Staten Island, New York. I went to a Catholic all-girls high school filled with Italian princesses, and they were all trying to be my color. And I'm like, tell me what's happening. Like,
hey.
So, but, you know, for me, it's fascinating because Costa Rica, where my family is from, has a little bit of a different history than most of Latin America. We didn't have slaves, or not many slaves. Our indigenous population was wiped out. So, like, I did a 23andMe. I think I'm like 50% Spanish or European, and then like 5% Black, and then like everything else indigenous. So, like, for me to be called a negra, like, one, my mom got called negra her entire life. She's about the same skin tone as me. And then, you know, for me to be called it, like, one, I never understood why that was a bad thing, / like why it was an insult. And two, like, especially like going to college, going to school in New York, and seeing like actual Black people, I'm like, y'all need to get it together. So with that, I would love to sort of open up the discussion to everybody, and sort of talk about, like, going into, you know, the loaded question of the intersectionality of Latino and Black lives, and, you know, how the movements should intersect, should help each other.
Anyone talk? Question? Yeah. So hi guys, my name is Samantha. I just wanted to say like a little bit like my story, which is interesting. So I'm Dominican and Ecuadorian, and I was raised in like Harlem, New York my whole life. So I was around like Black and Latino people my whole life. So when I went to school in DC, I go to George Washington. It's a predominantly white school. So like it was a real like rude awakening. I was like, y'all would never play yourself like this in New York. Like, y'all teachers would never come for me like this. So when I went to DC, like, the teachers are very, like, frank. Oh, sorry. I'm also an hermana of Sigma Lambda Upsilon. Señoritas Latinas Unidas, so we're incorporated. This is the only paragraph so far. I don't know if y'all can see it. But going off that, so I remember when I was in DC, like, I had a lot of, like, I experienced like a lot of like racist incidents, like from the professor specifically. Like, I remember one time I went in box braids. The next week she didn't even know who I was anymore. She was like, "Are you new to my class?" Or like even being stopped like by cops in the street. Like, they're like, "Do you even go here?" Like, literally. And like I remember coming back from like the whole situation with COVID, and like that's when the Black Lives Matter movement was like really heightened up. And I remember my family was sitting in the living room like booing, talking about it. And they're like, yeah, like they were talking about it like it could, like as if it could never happen to them. And like when they was talking about it, I was like, yo, pero like Theo over here got arrested, like he was in jail. Like what would you have done that would have been him? Like you have to make it really personal when I feel like when you speak to like Latino households, unless because if you don't, they try to separate themselves from the issue. So I remember like sitting there and I was telling like my grandparents, and I was like, look, like I went through this at GW, I went through this. And then I see the anger in them because now they're like, okay, like it can happen to my granddaughter. And I just think it's interesting how like, I feel like that's something we need to cut off. Like it doesn't have to happen to you. It doesn't have to happen to your sister. It doesn't have to happen to your cousin for you to feel that. Because at the end of the day, like
at the end of the day, it affects way more people than people realize. And I feel like Latinos, specifically the older generation, they be needing rude awakening. Like Maximo had brought up, like sometimes you have to be like harsh with them. When I had told them, like, all right, like Theo was in jail for like about 5 years. Like, would you, like, when the cops arrested him, if this would have happened, what would you have said then? What would you have your excuse have been then? Like, oh, like it was just another incident. And I feel like sometimes what Latinos tend to do is that, like, if there is a sense of police brutality, they don't think it's because of racism. They think like, oh, like something just happened. Like, no, like you need to realize this is happening because you're Black. And I think that's also the first step. That people don't realize this is happening to them because they're Black. Not because it was just a mistake and the cops just lost his mind. Like, no, abuela, he thought he was Black and that's why he did that. And like, I feel like that's something they just don't understand. But yeah.
That's absolutely right. I agree with what you said. But I'm gonna, take it a bit further as well, and bring up the point which people have brought up to me, is that at what point do people stop blaming things on their color or their race? So yes, I'm like, you profile me because I'm Black. Yes, I have all these stats stacked against me, but at the same time, there's some people out there who will sit back and use the race card to hide behind their ill behavior and their lack of progression. And that is also not okay. Like, that as well has to be checked within our own community. Like, don't just sit back and misbehave, and then when you get caught up in some kind of mess, which you get yourself into, you pull the race card. Do not give yourself to the authorities to allow them to entrap you. And a lot of people forget to add that to the conversation too. It's one thing if you're a regular citizen, going about your life, going to school, and you literally are just breathing, and someone is attacking you with these racist ideas. That's absolutely not okay. But if you're out here gang banging and breaking the rules and doing whatever you want to do, and you can get caught up in a mess, then throwing that race card in there, it just makes us even look worse, because now you're allowing people to perpetrate the idea of people of color equals lazy, lawless, and a menace society, when that is not what we want to perpetrate.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
To piggyback off that though, I feel like that's like kind of like a dangerous line, because it's kind of like, some of it is because like that did happen because I'm Black, and then you have to compare though, like, okay, let's say like I was gang banging, but Billy from up the block was gang banging too, and he didn't die while he was gang banging. So sometimes even if I am a criminal, criminals also don't deserve to die. So I'm not giving anyone a reason to do anything. I don't care if I pulled up and committed a crime. It doesn't have to equal to that. And I think that's also something that like I've experienced throughout college, like proving the white man wrong. Like, I'm not proving nothing to you. You need to respect me regardless. Because if your son would have done it, he would have had the benefit of the doubt and he would have got a second chance. So I feel like that's why sometimes I'm kind of like, okay, I don't want to prove them right, but I'm also like, I don't want to live like my life thinking like, I don't want to prove them that I'm lazy, or I don't want to prove this to them. So it's kind of like a fight within yourself.
It's a slippery slope. Absolutely. Yeah.
It definitely is. And I shout out to my LS. Yeah, I can see how, again, both ways are, messy. And that's, again, why kind of sometimes I'm obnoxious and I'm very proudful and I'll blast my music on purpose. And so, like, getting to, I guess, since we're talking about specific stories, I dormed at City. And City's a pretty diverse school. Like, everyone knows it's majority not white, right? There's like maybe 5-10% of the school is white, but in the dorms it's majority white. And in the dorms I would be looked at like, who are you, why are you here, you kind of don't belong, no matter the demographic that is on campus, and so being that that's how I felt, I guess also just realizing, you're allowed to be there. You're allowed, like she said, you're allowed to do wrong things and still live. You're allowed to sit in the lounge of your own dormitory and study and not have to be questioned or not get the cops called on you, because it's not just, and I know you don't mean it this way, but it's not just the bad, but it's also even breathing that these things happen, right? And so like even walking in, and I would get a hard time for trying to sign in somebody. Mind you, the white person next to me, they'd all be a group of white people, and they would just let them go, even though I knew for a fact half of them were guests and they needed to be signed in too. But because they fit the stereotype of who lived in the building, it'd be like, go right ahead. Or something as simple as us going out. So my group of friends just so happened to be that we were all Black. Obviously you kind of move towards the people that look like you in any aspect. Don't get me wrong, obviously it wasn't just all Black, but the majority of us were. And so going out at night for a bodega run became something like having to walk in with security and make sure that they see your photo ID as you walk in. And little things like that, these microaggressions, I feel like they're not okay no matter how we paint them. And oftentimes, because they've happened for so long, since literally the beginning of time, we've kind of found a way to excuse them, especially in academia. I know other people want to go, so.
I kind of wanted to share my own personal experience since it hasn't been discussed on the panel yet. Oh, by the way, I'm Marta. Hopefully you can hear me over the mask. I'm not feeling well, so I'm just trying to protect my mom just in case, because I live with her at the moment. So, so excuse the mask. So I am, thank you. So I am Puerto Rican and Colombian, but I am extremely white passing. And if you see to the side, my nose is quite big. So I am often mistaken for European, Jewish, Russian. I've gotten Indian. And so it's been a really bizarre experience for me, even though my family is extremely mixed. I grew up, like literally grew up thinking I was half Black and half white because all of my cousins have melanin in their skin and I didn't. And so I thought, well, we're family, so I must have it in me too. And the day that I realized, and mind you, I was like really like a kid, like elementary school. So the day that like I realized that that wasn't the situation, it like shattered my world. I feel like I've always kind of struggled with my identity because I didn't grow up in the typical Latina household. Even though I know the language, my mom made the effort to put me in a dual immersion program all throughout my education. My dad taught me Spanish, but then it's a split home. So, he's kind of like semi out of the picture. And my mom is very like New Yorican, but like Americana hippie, like peace and love. So it's been a really interesting experience. And I, as someone who is Latin but passes for white, I experience, and I wanted to share with you guys because I don't even know if you've had these experiences or have heard of these types of experiences, but the things that I experience is kind of like, okay, I really hate using this term. I despise it, but I think it kind of like signifies it like a reverse racism. And I know that's a really sensitive term to say. So I just wanted, so I'll give an example. So oftentimes, I grew up in extremely diverse schools and I have an extremely diverse group of friends. So I have had so many experiences where I'm going to play manhunt with my friends in Morningside in the park, and a cop car rolls up on us. And the first thing that happens is they call me over and they say, "Miss, come here." And I'm like, "Me?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I walk over and they're like, "Are you okay?" And it pisses me off so much because they're not asking me if I'm actually okay they're asking me like, oh, you're the lightest skinned person in the group. You don't seem like you belong. Are you like being held captive or something, like ridiculous stuff. Like it infuriates me. And that happens to me all the time. It's happened in high school when I had the principal send my mother a letter about my choice of friends and how they were hoodlums, and that it was the wrong type of people for me to be hanging out with. And my mom was like, you have no idea who these people are. These are wonderful kids, because this is high school. And having to send a scathing letter back to the principal saying, like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, you're obviously being racist, because all of my friends are mostly of color, So it's just like, I wanted to share that experience that, like, I hate using that term reverse racism. Please trust me, like, I don't like using it. But in a way, does that kind of like, do you guys understand that, like, my experience is like, it makes me uncomfortable too. Like, I get so infuriated when I am pointed out and my safety is questioned hanging out with my friends, or most of the time it's the safety. It just like it infuriates me that there is no equality. And like, that's how, so I guess my point is, as a light-skinned Latina, that's how I experience the I guess like that's my experiences with racism or with inequality, is because like I don't experience what you guys experience, and it breaks my heart that you guys experience those things. Like, wow, I'm gonna get emotional. Holy crap, I'm sorry. It like genuinely upsets me that we're not equal. And so just as much as you guys don't feel equal, just know that there are lighter skinned people who are like me, who are Latina, but we pass for white, and we experience the backlash of that, or like a different aspect of that. And it pisses us off because, like, I fear for all my family members that have more melanin in their skin than I clearly, do. I don't have any. So it's just like, it's so frustrating when I am pointed out because of the color of my skin as well, in a different way. So I just wanted to share that because it wasn't something that was talked about. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, thank you so much for sharing, because that sheds a light on something different. That kind of goes more into the idea of colorism. And we can be here all night, all day talking about colorism within our own communities and how toxic that is. But that all goes back to the idea of like educating and beginning to break these cycles. So for example, like, even I have locks. So having locks versus Lenny having curly hair versus your hair now being slightly straighter, that shouldn't matter. But the same way in which someone will respect a lighter skinned person more, or put down a lighter skinned person because they're not black enough, is something that also has to be checked. Because what does black enough mean? What does white enough mean? And why are we in the 21st century? Like, why are we still using our skin tone and our complexion and the length of our hair, or how tight our hair curls are, whether it's a weave or braids or locks, whatever it is? Why is that still a reason why we continue to suppress ourselves from achieving success? Because there's more power in us coming together, putting aside our differences to work for a goal and build our own community and build back Black Wall Street or whatever it is. I always say that, like, end of the day, I'm at the point right now, end of the day, it's like, I'm Black. That's how I identify as. And if I see someone next to me who appears to be Black but doesn't want to acknowledge that, I'm like, all right, bro, like, do your thing. I'm not going to force you to identify as my race if you do not want that. Like, respectfully, that's like your cup of tea. And it's hard on the mental, but it gets to a point where, like, you have to be able to, create your own version of who you are as a person. Like, what is your identity? And just let that motivate you to be great, motivate you to educate people that listen. Like, I may be light, but I'm very much in touch with my roots, you know? So don't let my lack of melanin confuse you, or don't mistake my brother or my sister or my cousin or my friend for being dangerous to me because they have more melanin, you know? And frankly, I'm nervous about the winter coming up.
Marta said, like, when it comes to like, and what everybody's like been saying, especially Charlene with colorism, is like it's crazy now, like how most people haven't changed when it comes to that. As like me personally, like I personally can never identify as really a woman of color because although I'm Latina, my skin color is white. So like whenever I think about Latin representation, I can't really criticize saying, oh, well, I don't see my own representation because I already see a lot of white Latinos represented on the media compared to like indigenous or Afro Latinos whatsoever. So, you know, when it comes to like all that anti-blackness, it just gets me pissed off because it's like, come on, like for example, like the Emmys just passed and a lot of like black actors and actresses were nominated and a lot of like Latinos were like upset, like, why is there no Latin representation? I'm like, can you give like, you know, the black community time to shine? Because when you think about other awards like the Oscars, like you never really see a lot of like actors and actresses or directors or like in Hollywood industry being nominated or winning an award, you know, that they deserve, that they work hard for.
I think that's really interesting that, and it kind of got me thinking about like this whole discussion of like breaking the cycle and how do we go forward and how do we change and coming up with new standards of what we expect how we expect our society to be in terms of equality and kindness and that sort of thing. And so Ashley bringing up the you know, like award shows and so I think that's also a part of the problem too. That needs to stop being our standard, quite frankly. And I think there is a movement in that industry for it to stop being the standard. A lot of celebrities stop going to various award ceremonies and stuff like that. So that's just another point in like breaking the cycle that we need to reprioritize what our standards are, like, and that, you know, like an award show is not society, you know, like there is inequality in it. Absolutely. Yeah.
To go off that, actually, when they were like talking about the Latinos who were like complaining, like I remember it was like a whole thing on Instagram, like a lot of people from the Latino community was kind of upset because we were like, you guys, like whatever Latino decided to like speak for all of us, we was like, can you not? Because there were actual like Afro Latinos who have been nominated, but it was the same racist Latinos, white Latinos who were like, what about us? And it's like, no, like Afro Latinas were, but because we're not, because Afro Latinos are such in the middle, people don't, both sides sometimes forget about us. So like when white Latinos were complaining, black Latinos were like, no, like we were thought of. It was just like no white Latinos were nominated. And I feel like that was their problem. And just to speak off of that, I think that I've been told many times that, oh, you're not black, this, that, and the third. And it's like, I understand my privilege in being a lighter skinned black woman. And I feel like sometimes people have this thing where like they don't want to talk about their privilege. Like, yes, like my hair is actually really, really curly. I just blow dried it. And I'm like, my family calls me morenita. Like that's like, it is like, that's all true. But then I think it's also important to realize that I do have privilege in myself. And I feel like sometimes people think you have to pick or choose. Like, no, you can be black and still have some type of privilege. Like, yes, I'm black. I live in a black body. I have a black experience. But I do have a different experience than darker skinned women. And I feel like people forget that in the conversation.
Hello, I just wanted to share really fast, just like my experience. My name is Ashley. I'm also an Imam of Sigma Lambda Upsilon. I graduated from Buffalo State College. So growing up, it's been really different for me. I'm gonna show you my brother right now. This is my youngest brother. Say hi. Hi. Okay, that's my brother. I have a 17-year-old brother as well. So with them, I really try to teach them from early, like we are Black, but our ethnicity is Dominican. And it's crazy because we live in Long Island. So it's a whole different, it's just completely different out here. And it's crazy that at such a young age, which I think it's good because they get to learn earlier, but at such a young age, they're asking me these questions about things that are going on in their school and like things that people tell them. Like they question like, oh, you can't speak Spanish. But at the same time, they're like, they're getting all different types of labels. And I'm just letting them know, like, listen, you have to like learn this from early, especially living in Long Island. And then with me, because I don't look like my brothers, I don't look like my father, I get the two different sides. I get, oh, some people are like, oh, like they look at me when I'm with them because they're like kind of confused. They're trying to figure out like, who are they to her type thing. I always get that look. Especially out here in Long Island sometimes. But then I also sometimes get the opposite where people are looking at my hair and like they're just looking at me. I remember vividly working for a YMCA and one of the mothers asked me, she said, can I touch your hair? And she was like so amazed by it. And I was just looking at her like, I didn't even know what to say. So it's things like that. And it's true what Samantha said, like, yes, I am Black, but I do, because I have a lighter skin complexion, you know, some people may feel like I don't experience everything others do, which is true. But then when I'm with my family, it's like they're looking at me like, wait, like they're confused. And I was just like, you see my brother, I have an older brother, my dad, like I don't look like really any of them. So it's just really hard to balance. But the one thing that I would say is like, I have hope, and I'm just happy that our generation right now, even though it's been long overdue, our generation right now, I feel like everyone is, at least from what I'm seeing, researching and trying to put in work and talking about action. And I feel like that's, you know, the first step. And one thing that I really try to do is just talk to the youth about it, because I don't really feel like it's too early. So I talk to my brothers about it all the time, especially with them living in Long Island. I let them know, like, listen, this is what it is. So that's just what I wanted to say in my little piece.
Ashley, my sister went to Buffalo and pledged Beta, so she was Caroline solo. So I just wanted to thank everybody for sharing their experiences and sharing their thoughts on the movements. Thank you so much to our panelists, Lenny, Charlene, Quentin, and Maximo for sharing your insight about the Black Lives Matter movement and sort of how we're all different skin shades, but we're all facing the same issues at the end of the day. And, you know, I think it's up to each of us to do our part and, you know, as we say in Spanish, sigue la lucha, like continue the fight. Clearly, we're far from over. Breonna Taylor's I don't want to say the verdict decision because it wasn't a verdict. There was no decision. The lack of a verdict, the lack of a decision shows how far we still need to go. And so I'm thankful for, you know, the safe space for everybody sharing their experiences. And I hope we can continue these discussions online, in person, when it's safe, everything. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We hope it was as productive for you as it was for us. And stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you so much on behalf of Omicron for coming out, guys. Be safe, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, guys. This was amazing. Thank you.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Bye.